Hey guys, welcome back to Clownfish TV. This is Kneon. I am here with Geeky Sparkles.
Hello.
And this is going to be a different kind of a video. We're going to talk about comic book creator Chuck Austen and kind of where he's been and where he's going. He's got a new ComiXology series coming out. And it's really interesting because if Chuck Austen sounds familiar to those of you who follow the channel, it's because Chuck Austen worked in comics for a while, then he worked in animation, and he basically got blacklisted and relegated to being a sidekick, a silent producer.
Yeah, I think it was he did more, but they didn't want to give, they wanted to make sure the credit went to Noelle Stevenson.
Yeah, he worked on She-Ra. He worked on She-Ra, he worked on some other shows for DreamWorks behind the scenes, and you can kind of see this when you watch She-Ra and the Princesses of Power, that the first couple episodes are
And I'm the one to point
uneven.
this out before you go yelling about, well, men. I noticed that they were, the first season especially, it was very all over the place, and the early episodes were, and then they started, his name starts appearing more often, and they get tighter, and the second season definitely was, you know, more story focused. And
they also refused to mention him. They did not mention him in interviews.
But yeah, he would show up on the thing as he was actually a producer with her, but they would never mention him.
And you know, I want to talk about that because basically the way it seems to be working, especially in animation and comics, is you're allowed to be a cis white dude with masculine influences as long as you prop up people who are not.
And they might not be up to the challenge of doing the job correctly because you have experience and they don't. Just don't look up.
Yeah, because we joked about how we think Chuck Austen was brought in. Now, we knew Chuck Austen was involved in She-Ra when there was one site that mentioned it offhandedly. We checked the IMDb, and yeah, he was given a co-producer credit or something, co-executive producer, but he was not mentioned in the first like 8 or 10 episodes of the show. They did
mention it sometimes, but they said they didn't even have listed as Chuck. They had like Chuckles Austen or something like that. Like they were even they kind of demeaning it there that way too.
Yeah, but I honestly think he was brought in to fix the show. Because
I think so too.
Chuck Austen has decades of experience working in animation, working in comics, and Noelle Stevenson was literally plucked off of Tumblr and handed the keys to a classic IP and given millions of dollars to work with to create this show for DreamWorks. And I think they're like, oh my God, this is a train wreck. We need to bring somebody in who knows what the hell they're doing. But the story is, it's just a bunch of young ladies from Tumblr. And
in their totally diverse writers' room.
The totally almost white diverse writers' room.
And it's all girls, yeah.
And we can't, you know, ruin that narrative. They even have matching pink jackets and everything. So we'll bring Chuck Austen in, but he's going to do it on the down low.
He doesn't get a matching pink jacket.
He doesn't
or
get
his picture put out there, or very much mentioned very often, for that matter.
Yeah, but now he's coming back swinging with this comic series. Now I know it's just a ComiXology thing, but it's really interesting to see what his influences are. And it's very relatable to those of us, you know, who grew up in the 70s, 80s, 90s.
But it would be considered toxic and toxic male by these ring people today.
So he's letting his masculinity flag fly, and I think it's great. And I think we need to, you know, realize that, you know, men still work in these fields, and it's okay to have masculine influences and make manly comics. There's an audience for that. There's a definite audience for that. Look at what's going on with the Luke Skywalker situation right now. People want male heroes. You can try to spin it any way you want to spin it. Now, it's not an either or. You can have strong female protagonists. You can have, you know, all kinds of diverse protagonists, but there still is a demand for manly men doing manly things.
Right. And I'm still a proponent of mixed cast because I think it's great. I think it's really cool when you have a more of a team or more than one protagonist, because I think that it makes it a stronger, more interesting story, and it's more relatable because in your real life you have people of different genders, races, or whatever that you interact with on an everyday basis. It's not just one type of person. So
before we get into this video, and this might run a little long because I'm gonna wax.
This is Neon's turn.
Yeah, I'm actually pretty excited about this one.
I knew you would. That's why I sent it to you.
You're like, this is why I sent this to you. Seeing what his influences are, I'm gonna get a little nostalgic.
I know you well.
A little nostalgic. Before we get into it, please subscribe for more pop culture news, views, and rants, guys. We're over 170,000 subs. Hoping for 200,000 soon. Coming from comicbook.com, Chuck Austen breaks down influences for his new ComiXology series, Edgeworld. And it's interesting because it has military elements. It has strong Western overtones.
Yes.
And it has a male protagonist with a gun.
I know, how dare they?
With a gun. And I think it looks pretty cool. if I'm being honest. So he's talking about it and all the influences he had, and he's talking about John Wayne, the Duke. He's problematic now.
Yes, yes, he is.
He's talking about Jimmy Stewart. He's talking about Henry Fonda. We loved Westerns, the people working on this. We rode various horses around my imagination through my childhood. Much of that was my grandmother's influence, as she loved everything Western.
In your case, it was your grandfather's influence.
So let me tell you about my pap. Okay, so
Well, first of all, you were pretty much raised by your grandparents.
Yeah, my grandparents, it's complicated. Let's just say that my childhood was complicated, but my grandparents did a lot of the raising. So I am kind of a generation removed, I think, from where I should be. I think I do in some ways maybe have more of a boomer mindset because of being raised by my grandparents who grew up during the Depression and World War II and all of that. So my grandfather was a massive Western fan.
He was.
Freaking loved Westerns. He also was a mechanic and he worked on classic cars. So my growing up, even though I grew up in the 80s and 90s, I still had a healthy dose of Westerns from the 50s and 60s, a lot of TV shows from back then, Andy Griffith's show.
I got those too from my mom and dad, though.
Yeah, yeah. And, classic cars. He used to quiz me on, he would show me a picture of a car when I was a kid and be like, what is this? And I knew a lot of these, Edsels and Cords and all that, because he was into it. He had all kinds of cars all over the house. But Gunsmoke, we used to watch Gunsmoke all the time. So together, Sundays, usually we watch Westerns, and he would just let the TV run all day. It was CBN, which was, back then was Christian Broadcasting.
Right.
And then it became like the Family Channel, and now it then became Disney or ABC Family, and now it's Freeform. So once upon a time, Freeform used to be a Christian channel that ran Westerns all the time. And so we would just leave the TV on pretty much all weekend, and we watch, Big Valley and Gunsmoke and Bonanza and all these Westerns. Rifleman.
All the things that the restaurants are named after.
Yeah, pretty much. Ponderosa. We watched all this stuff, and, I freaking loved the Rifleman. Man, I loved how he was able to just, knock out those. It was cool. Anyway, so to hear him say that he liked Westerns, and right now, Westerns, this culture is considered like the most toxic. We're like, oh my God, white men with guns?
Yes.
We can't do that. That's awful.
That's why I sent it to you. I thought it was interesting. He goes from working on She-Ra and the Princesses of Power as with all his pretty much credit stripped away, but making it go, to flipping, just going for it, and these are his influences, and they're all things that would be considered toxic by the select few on Twitter that seem to dictate everything.
Yeah, so let's back this up a little bit before we go back into how he got into comics and all that. He had a controversial run on the X-Men about 20 years ago. Fans did not like his take on the X-Men. I didn't particularly care for it, but given what they're doing today in comics, I think it's a hell of a lot better.
Yeah.
There were some things that were kind of questionable, but nothing compared to the shit they're doing at Marvel now. It actually looks like a freaking masterpiece. But he left comics. He said he basically got blacklisted. And
that never happens, don't you know? Just ask
right.
Twitter. Never happens. You just, there's just these little secret lists are passing around behind the scenes and stuff like that, but it never happens.
But he actually worked in animation. First, he started out with King of the Hill, and then Tripping the Riff. And, then he's like, well, I'll do comics for a while. And he knew that comics, one, it doesn't pay nearly as well as animation, and two, that people come and go all the time. So he's like, I know I'm not going to be doing this.
Blacklisting's common.
Yeah.
Yes, it is, but according to Twitter, it's not.
Yeah. So what happened? So we wound up at DreamWorks, right? Now, here's the thing. Because it's not cool to be, I don't know how old Chuck Austen is. I would say, if I had to guess, I would say, given his influences, 50s, maybe early 60s. I don't know. And he was working in comics like 20 some years ago. But he said after it was all over with comics or whatever, he went back into animation, working on the Cleveland show. Problematic. White man voicing Cleveland. The cartoon business is notorious for being show to show, one season and canceled, so he moved around a lot, as most animators do, boarding, directing, whatever was needed. So he knew firsthand how to do a lot of different things.
And he was able to do whatever was needed, which is something people today need to understand. Back in the day, for an art teacher, I'm going to speak for a minute. Back in the day, you used to be an everyman where you would come into something and you'd know how to do, if you had a job, you'd know how to do all the elements of the job. Now, they have people so specialized. I know when I was teaching art, they had a poster from an art school, and it used to be you'd do it for like, you get a degree in graphic design, or you get a degree in digital animation or something like that. Now it's like you're trained specifically to be the person who does flames on digital animation, or you're specifically trained to be fonts or whatever, or something stupid that you're having so specialized that it's dangerous, because if you can't find that specialized opening, you're screwed. We're back in the day, people were training all of them so they could be versatile. And that's what he is. He's versatile, which makes sense.
Yeah, early Disney, if you look at how it was done, like a lot of the stuff, they were making it up as they went along.
Be versatile.
And but what happens is when they start cutting jobs, if you're not versatile, you're basically done.
Right. And that's the problem with them pigeonholing everyone into these very specific majors and charging for the nose for it. But I'm looking at the list and I'm like, there's like 20 different majors and they all would fall under one umbrella. And I was like, well, back in the day you were taught how to do all this stuff.
Yeah.
And that was the degree. And now you're just taught this one thing, and that's dangerous. Don't do that. Anyway, continue.
Everything I've learned, I mean, I've done a lot of different things. I've worked in marketing, I've worked as a journalist, I've worked as a web developer, and 95% of that was I picked it up as I went along.
Right.
Because a lot of the stuff, that they teach you in school today, 10 years from now is not even going to be applicable.
Right.
You have to be able to learn.
If you're going to college soon for something like this, try to find a university that's going to teach you a broad range in that field, not just one specific. You can specialize in one specific area, but you want to make sure you have a background in all of that, because you are literally limiting your options. That has nothing to do with this video, but I thought I'd take a moment to give that piece of advice.
Yeah, media is not being a doctor. It's not like you go train to be a urologist or whatever.
But even then, a doctor, it might have a specialty, but they are trained as a doctor.
Cross-trained.
Yes. Yeah. So, continue.
All right. Anyway, so given his experience, and he had a lot of experience, I had the ability to teach and mentor younger people. You had a usefulness as a mentor. Like, we'll keep you around, Chuck, even though you're an older white dude. We'll keep you around so you can teach the next generation how to take your job.
Because he's a no ego, happy to play second banana and not take the credit, as he mentions. Go ahead.
Right. He said my career shifted from being what I call shifted to being what I call a support producer.
Even though you get producer credit.
It started on Steven Universe. So he was helping steer the ship in Steven Universe, and continued on when they needed somebody at DreamWorks for Dawn of the Croods, helping his friend. DreamWorks had a consistent need for someone like me, someone with no ego who's happy to play second banana. So I've stayed here and continued helping on various shows.
Basically, someone who's not going to want credit and will help these people who don't know what the hell they're doing, but while letting them have credit for it, so they can make it all about them, like they did with Noelle Stevenson, because you couldn't talk about She-Ra without having Noelle Stevenson smeared all over it.
Yeah, because you want to talk about, being top banana. Like, again, Noelle Stevenson's rise in the animation industry makes zero sense. It really does. And a lot of these people who are working on these shows, because the way it used to be was that you worked your way up doing this, boarding, directing, whatever was needed, and eventually, an opportunity would come up that you'd be put in charge. You'd be a director. You'd be a showrunner.
It doesn't seem like he got to do that. It seems like he just always got stuck as that, so that other people with no experience, but were the right gender, or have the check boxes, could be made to be the ones who got all the credit.
Basically, Noelle Stevenson's bridesmaid is what he got to be.
Always the bridesmaid, never the bride.
But given the climate in Hollywood, he's probably like, I will take whatever work I can get. And this is tragic, because it should be, if he was actually the one that was pulling all the pieces of this shit together and making it go.
There's a definite difference. You can see it.
Yeah.
I like he says, I actually love my work, which is part of the happier thing he talks about. And obviously he does, because it seems like it's more about getting to do this stuff, and he wants to just work on this stuff because it makes him happy more than it is about making sure he gets all the credit.
Now, he doesn't want people to get the wrong idea.
I know, I remember this.
Again, I was the support producer. Noelle did most of the heavy lifting.
Bullshit.
She never mentioned him. I don't think she ever mentioned him publicly. I was there to oversee the episodes, give notes to get playing the way Noelle wanted.
Why wasn't he brought in when they had the panels and stuff? It was always Noelle Stevenson and all her friends. Why wasn't he brought in to speak as well?
I had no hand in the original creative pitch or development. So basically...
Well, that's up for debate who did anyway.
Yeah. So basically what happened was they handed her, as I understand, the keys to this franchise. They handed her the keys to the kingdom. They let her do whatever she wanted to do. And then I think once they got her and her team in there and they realized that they had jack shit experience in animation, it was like, oh my God, we just gave her millions of dollars to work with. We got to get somebody in here who knows what they're doing.
But that's never the story you're going to hear.
That's never... Why is she not praising Chuck Austen in interviews? Why is it when they send the press things out, they never mention
It's always
it?
creator, producer. They always give her credit for creating She-Ra too. She did not create effing She-Ra.
And she is very happy to take that credit.
Oh, but this is not unusual for her because she was always happy to take credit for other things she didn't do way before that.
Lumberjanes.
Yeah.
Lumberjanes. Anyway, so, I mean, this is sad, though, that this is how you can exist in Hollywood. And, going back to, again, that rumored Lucasfilm Civil War, what WDW Pro said on Pirates and Princesses, where he said there are multiple factions within Lucasfilm, and some of them are just old-timers who are happy to be there, and they just keep their head down. That is Chuck Austen. He's a workman-like, he knows how to do stuff. He doesn't want to rock the boat. He just wants to make sure he's still employable. And you can get work in Hollywood, apparently, as a middle-aged white guy who's skilled as long as you keep your damn mouth shut.
You know your place.
You know your place.
You know where your faces belong.
If you know where your face belongs, you're allowed to do that. And it's sad because somebody with that much skill who's been doing it for this long should be given the keys to be able to be a showrunner or something. At least try. Anyway, his influences: Gunsmoke, Toxic. Miss Kitty was actually a strong female character back in the 60s.
They only invented those since 2015 or 16. Get it right.
Bringing up, Kathleen Hite and Marion Clark, two regular women writers in the 50s. Yeah, they had a lot of women writers on these. People don't realize that.
Women didn't create or write anything or do anything with any show or cartoon ever until Noelle Stevenson and, until we had Steven Universe and all that. That's the first time women were allowed to be writers and important to shows.
True Grit. Awesome. Again, classic Western. True story about True Grit. My stepdad, who I've talked about off and on here, grew up in California, grew up in Newport Beach, and used to take out John Wayne's trash. Mm-hmm. I don't know if he ever went through John Wayne's trash, but he was John Wayne's trash man. So now you know. That was my stepdad, one of his first jobs. He was like 19 or 20 taking out his trash. True Grit, again, the Coen Brothers version of it. Once Upon a Time in the West. I mean, this is all the toxic masculinity all in one place. The Searchers. Look at this. Look at, Island, Aldous Huxley, Brave New World, Island, Twilight Zone, original version, right? Not the reboot. Luke Skywalker.
How dare they? Star Wars.
Luke Skywalker is an influence. I mean, this is I actually
Star Trek.
I actually think I would get along with this guy.
Star Trek, the original series, which was my dad's favorite.
Which was basically a kind of a Western in space with a sci-fi mixed in.
Seems like he's talking about the one and done format.
Yeah.
Cool.
Monster of the Week, Plot of the Week, which I actually miss that.
I do too.
Because the problem now is all these showrunners want to set these big payoffs.
Look how creative we are. Look how we play on this all through.
But what happens a lot of times is, one, it's very hard to follow the beginning because
it's hard for people to come into it, and
right. Like Star Trek, you could just be flipping through the channels. There's Star Trek. You get the basics. They tell you the basics in the beginning. We're on a ship. We got a 5-year mission. Here we go. Yeah, that's all you need to know.
Okay, this is interesting though. And most importantly for me as a kid from the wrong side of the tracks, their world more accurately represented my own. Varied races, diverse personalities, strong women, military men. Because that was only existed in the last couple years because Hollywood says so. But when he saw his world, he saw that shows like Star Trek showed different races, diverse people, strong women, and military men. Total lies. Can't be true because it's only been invented in the last few years. Ask Tumblr and Twitter.
It's so weird you talk about Star Trek because I was just thinking the other day, they're going on about how diverse new Star Trek is right now. Look at the cast of Deep Space Nine. Look at the cast of Voyager. Mm-hmm. We're talking shows that are 25, 30 years old.
They only invented it now because Hollywood said so. And Twitter said so.
I grew up watching those shows. I never thought anything about it. Some of my favorite sitcoms when I was a kid, Good Times, What's Happening.
I know, we were in the 80s. Those were the shows everybody watched. It was like,
Cosby Show was the top show.
I know, but everybody's racist. They've been racist forever until now. You're stop lying and changing the narrative. How dare you?
You look at some of the biggest celebrities back then, too. I mean, Eddie Murphy was huge.
I know, and no one cared.
Nobody cared.
I know, right? But no, It's all because it's always been kept down, and it's always been about racism and isms and phobes until just now, when it was just now changed by these strong people.
Deep Space Nine. Deep Space Nine had a black lead in like 1993 or 94. We had a woman.
And no one thought anything of it because it was normal.
Yeah, I never thought anything of it. Like, it never...
It was like, I gotta watch this because it's a black lead. I was just like, oh, look, but you looked
it's
at...
Star Trek. I'm gonna watch Star Trek.
Yes!
Because it's a good show. You know, now everything, you have to break everything down into gender and race. And it's like we're going backwards. We're going backwards.
Yes!
We dealt with a lot of this shit. Now, I'm not saying we dealt with everything. Obviously, there are still issues in this country. I'm not saying we dealt with everything. But when it came to entertainment, we were actually more progressive and more open-minded back then, 25 years ago, than we are now, because, you know, you could just put any kind of person on TV as long as the show was good. But see, that's the thing. You want to use diversity, gender, sexual orientation as a prop. Like, my show's not that good, but you can't say anything about it because...
Right, the shield. What gets me is, too, back in the day, like, there'd be all different kinds of people that were diverse and you'd see them in school or whatever, and you would just think, oh, that's so-and-so. It wasn't like, oh, that's so-and-so and they're black, or that's so-and-so and they're a lesbian, that's so-and-so and they're a woman. It wasn't like that. Like, they keep trying to say that's what it was like, but it wasn't, because we lived it. It was basically like, oh, that's just so-and-so, and that's what, and they're in the art club, and they're in, you know, French club, or whatever, and it had nothing to do with those adjectives. It was just like, oh, that's so-and-so, and here's what they're involved in, some of the things I'm involved in, and I know them. You didn't look at it that way.
No, I mean, it was...
Years of, they just undid decades of progression.
I went to high school in California, Northern California. There were classes I was in where I was in the minority of white kids. I mean, there were classes that were mostly Asian, Hispanic kids, black kids. I had one class in particular, I think there's only like 3 or 4 white kids in. I was one of them. I never thought about it.
And no one cared.
Nobody cared back then. Like, you're making people think about things they never really thought about before. Like we can't go forward because you want to go back and bring up these issues.
They want to undo it so they can say that they're the ones that did it. And that's what we keep seeing over and over and over again with these people.
It's like teaching a kid to tie their shoes. You tie their shoes for them, and then you untie the shoe and let them tie it themselves so they think they're you know what I'm saying?
That's like, what it is. It's been tied for years, and now they're untying it and making a big show about how they're the ones inventing how you tie shoes.
And then you need to get a cookie for that too.
Right. Like, you know, yeah.
Jeez, but yeah, I mean, this is really...
I knew you'd like this.
This is sad because we have been talking about Chuck Austen's situation with him, and look, if he's happy to be the support producer, you know, hero support, that's fine. But the reality from where I'm sitting is we have a bunch of thoroughly unqualified people coming into Hollywood, coming into the animation scene that are being propped up by skilled people who are being, backburnered because I believe their race, their gender, and their age.
Which is, you know, the Austenphobes you're calling everybody else. And I love how on these news shows, they're so stunning and brave, but they stereotype everyone. Like, we have the Frost Power Girl being an Eskimo. You know, you have, look, she looks thinner now than she used to, Glimmer. And then you had, like, you know, okay, for the Perfuma, for example, they made her look like a hippie, tall, skinny, and now they're saying that it's a trans woman. Because, you know,
J.K. Rowling
style, retroactively, because, you know, don't you know that tall, thin women are obviously trans women?
Well, angry, grumpy, brown woman, just like Cora.
That's right.
Because we had to do that.
And lesbians, because, you know. And it's just like, it's ridiculous. It's all, we have to make Bo black because we just have to race bend because we can't have white people.
Well, you got to have your gay black best friend.
Notice how even in the picture they're using, it's like all, you know, look, they didn't even put like, you know, Seahawk, or people left as they were. They all other changes. And it's just like, I'm just like, you guys sit there and you go on about diversity, but you're the ones who are being the ones who are acting in a way that is contrary to what you're saying your message is.
Yeah, just sad. I think, you know, I want to say that maybe we're starting to get to a place now where we got to find some balance. You can't, like, I'm all for, like, let's not make everything straight and white. Okay, fine, I agree with that. But we can't be like, well, let's just get rid of all straight white men from Hollywood.
Because they're toxic just because they're men.
Because there's a place for everybody. I mean, if there's, again, it's additive. It's additive. It doesn't have to be a zero-sum game. You know, there's room for everybody.
Well, according to Brie Larson, that's how it was supposed to be, but then you keep seeing how that's not the case.
Yeah.
And you can definitely see all the straight white men, toxic males in this picture right here.
I think I'm going to buy this as ComiXology. I don't usually read comics digitally, but I think I'm going to buy this because I have a feeling I'm going to like this one. I am. And plus I want to support Chuck Austen because I think this guy...
He got screwed on the show.
I think he got screwed in animation. I really do. I mean, I could be misreading the situation, but the fact that he's been behind the scenes working on so many of these shows, but he's not allowed to come out and say...
And he seems to have a good attitude about it.
Yeah, I'd be pissed. I'll be honest, I would be, but that's me. That's my personality. I'd be like, fuck you, I did the work, I get the credit, you know? So, yeah, I think I'm going to go out and buy this on ComiXology for sure. Even though I wasn't a huge fan of his X-Men, I mean, this looks like I'd be into this.
I knew you would, that's why I sent it to you.
So thanks for sending it over.
You're welcome.
All right, so we're going to wrap this one up.
Yep.
Okay, so please subscribe for more pop culture news, views, and rants, guys. We'll talk later.
Bye.